Hello and welcome to another episode of Market Watch. Today we take a look at Sri Lanka's newly enacted Foreign Exchange Act, which repeals the former foreign exchange law which was in place for decades. We have with us today Travis Gomez, the product head for Frontier Research Private Limited. Travis, thank you very much for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
If you could introduce us to the Foreign Exchange Act and the government's intentions behind it itself, Travis, to start off proceedings.
So when it comes to this new foreign exchange, what they call the Foreign Exchange Management Act, really what the government, the sort of message that the government has also been trying to put out with regard to this new act is to sort of signal a shift in terms of the sort of the policy direction that they're taking. Mm-hmm. So the act itself, previously the previous act that we had in place was called a Foreign Exchange Control Act. And now we're basically moving to a foreign exchange management. So in a sense, they want to sort of signal a shift in their thinking in terms of how they perceive foreign exchange and how they basically view policies directed towards this. So this act came into effect on the 20th of November, and that's something that they want to emphasize. And it kind of goes in line with some of the other policy decisions that the government has been making. So with regard to the Inland Revenue Act or some of the new policies that are in place where they're looking at changing some of the immigration and immigration acts, they're trying to move towards more like a rules-based kind of approach where there is more transparency and there's more like overall there's more flexibility with regard to that.
So in addition to this shift from the rules-based approach, if you introduce us to the more salient features of the act itself.
So there's a couple of things that the act sort of clarifies. So one is with regard to it kind of clarifies some of the definitions regarding foreign exchange. So one is with regard to the definition of who is a resident and about who is eligible to open the different types of accounts. So there is much more clarity here in terms of, so it's sort of like they're trying to reduce the ambiguity there. So that's one thing that from a law perspective, that is an improvement. Then the other thing they want to do is to sort of reduce the overall complexity of anything relating to foreign exchange. So as you know, in the current regime, there are like so many different types of accounts that you have to open for different types of transactions. There's so many different types of accounts. Now in this, what they've done is they've kind of simplified the overall process. So from about 18 different accounts, they kind of clubbed them together into 5 accounts. So basically through that, they're trying to simplify and reduce these sort of ambiguities that happen. Then the other aspect is they also want to bring in more competition and kind of to give more discretion to the bank. Because at the moment the procedure is that basically you go to the bank saying, okay, you have this foreign some transaction you want to take through. The bank basically in most cases they are not sure whether can this go through or not, so they have to go back to the central bank and they have to consult with them, to the exchange control board. But now the sort of with this act what they're bringing about is the burden is now passed to the bank. The bank basically has more discretion. So as long as you provide the necessary documentation, the bank basically has the discretion to approve or disapprove of a transaction. So in that sense, the idea there is again to sort of speed up the process. To streamline it, and also they are increasing the competition at the same time. So not only do you have banks and finance companies, they are also allowing licensed exchange brokers to basically participate in this market.
What implications can we expect from the macro perspective, Travis?
So from a macro perspective, again, what the government is trying to signal is kind of like a more open approach to when it comes to foreign exchange. So in terms of, if you think about sort of what are the possible implications in terms of foreign direct investment, so one thing that they want to do is to sort of encourage basically more forex to come into the country, and more investment to come into the country. So one thing that this act is bringing in is they are broad basing the type of investments that foreigners can invest in Sri Lanka. So apart from the typical stocks and bonds and unit trusts, they're extending it to much more different asset classes. So particularly of interest is in this act they make explicit that foreigners, non-residents can invest in immovable property. So that basically implies real estate. So that is something really that would be a positive development, because given there's a lot of activity that is happening in real estate, basically we need, given the sort of the new supply that is coming in, you kind of need more foreign participation in order to sustain that industry. So that might be, there's implications there. And another thing they're also allowing for is, I think it was spoken about before in some of the previous budgets as well, is that basically you can provide loans either in foreign currency or in Sri Lankan rupees to non-residents to build property in Sri Lanka. So again, that's going to it's going to have some positive impacts in terms of that sector.
And if we look at the Act's implications in terms of the firm-wide and industry-specific, what can we expect?
Yeah, so firm-wide, what they are doing is they've basically extended the limits to what firms can go out and invest. So previously, if you're a listed corporate, you can invest up to 500,000 per year to go out and invest, whether it's stocks, bonds, or things like that. But in the current act, they basically extended it from 500,000 per year to 2 million. And you could also invest in sovereign bonds as well as unit trusts abroad. So they've extended the limits to what you can invest, and same thing goes for individuals as well. So you and I as an individual, we could invest only 100,000 for our lifetime abroad in terms of stocks, bonds, and things like that. Now they've basically doubled that amount to 200,000.
Right.
So this is really an opportunity for companies in Sri Lanka to sort of diversify their risk as well. They can go and invest abroad, and which would overall improve their performance.
Right. Any other aspects we can talk about with respect to the individuals than what you just mentioned, Travis?
Apart from this, the other thing to keep in mind would be there's a few limits with regard to how much foreign currency you can take in and out of the country. Right. So with regard to rupees, you can take something like, I think the limit is something like 20,000. Basically you can take up to 20,000 rupees in and out of the country without having to declare it. Anything above that you have to declare, and there's a similar limit for when it comes to taking out foreign currency as well. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But a more important one would be with regard to migration. So what they've done is they've increased the limits to how much money you can take abroad when you're planning to migrate. Right. So that initial amount you can take when you initially go abroad has been increased, as well as the amount you take out every year. So I think now it's been increased to like 30,000 USD per year you can take out of the country if you're migrating. And also these limits also don't apply if you're, for example, receiving some pension payments in lieu of that, or any EPF, ETF, or any like dividends. You can basically remit those abroad without, they are not basically subject to those limits.
Right.
So in that sense, they've kind of removed some of the restrictions there.
So $20,000 when you're traveling, and if it's migrating, $30,000 per annum.
Per annum, yes.
Lovely. So there you have it, our take on what the new Foreign Exchange Act looks like. We hope you've had an insightful views. Thank you very much, Travis, for joining us again.
Thank you.
And we hope you will join us next week for another episode of Market Watch. Have a great weekend.